All right, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Who are you and what interview are we doing right now?
I am Stacy Fatemi. My pronouns are they, them, and today we're talking about my vaginoplasty, which I got 7 years ago.
Okay, awesome. So why did you want to get vaginoplasty?
Well, I kind of just always wanted it, I guess. The thing is that from a very, very young age, even before I realized I was like at all queer, I'd been really uncomfortable with my like naked form in general. Like even when I was in elementary school, if I was gonna go to take a shower, I just would not want to look at myself in the mirror before I went in. And I was never really quite sure exactly why. But then when I realized I was trans at the age of 13, I was like, oh, wait, this is a thing. Like people have dysphoria about their body, about their genitals. And at that point, I was like able to put a label on what I felt, which is that I felt dysphoria, gender dysphoria about my genitals. And then at that point, I also had figured out that vaginoplasty existed, that there was a surgery that could give you a vulva and vagina if you had a penis. And I was like, I want that. Like, it was not even like a question in my mind. Like, I knew from that moment on exactly what I wanted and what it was called, the thing that I wanted. And literally, like, every single second that I lived from then until I actually got the vaginoplasty, I was just like, I want to have a vagina. I like don't want to have what I have now. I want to have a vagina. And so that's basically what propelled me to do it. That's why I got vaginoplasty.
And where did you first hear about it?
I'm not sure actually. I think that vaginoplasty is kind of it has this like almost mythological status amongst some people. They're like, oh yeah, you know that thing that people do, and then people are like not really sure if it's a thing. I think people would just talk about it and I would sort of pick it up from there. But I know for certain that once I figured out I was trans, I had researched a little bit about transition, and I for sure found out that it was a real thing that people do at that point when I was 13. But it was not until I was, 20 years old that I actually got the surgery. So,
Okay,
yeah.
cool. So what was the process you had to go through in order to get that surgery?
It was quite a long process. It basically started with me like making the decision. I'd come out like in 2014, and in 2016, after I'd been out and like I was in the midst of my transition, I had to actually make the decision to get the surgery, which was really difficult for me because I at that point had untreated and undiagnosed ADHD, which makes it kind of hard to like do these big tasks and plan in the way that you need to plan for this kind of surgery. But I decided that I would start off by like figuring out the money thing because I knew that it's a surgery and surgeries costs money, and I wasn't sure if my insurance would cover it. So I just would pour over these like insurance documents. I finally found the one that I thought would be like the policy that would allow me to get the surgery covered. But I couldn't really figure out how to like phrase it to ask if like my specific plan covered that. So I was on the phone with my insurance a lot, trying to come up with different ways to like ask the question because I didn't know anything about insurance. And eventually, I got connected with someone at the call center who was like, "Oh yeah, it's not like a benefit, but we do cover it." And they were able to confirm that under my plan it would be covered. And I was like, "Well, thank God," because like I really need this surgery. I found that out I think early January 2017, and I think that I'm not sure if I did this before or after finding that out, but I had already been searching for like surgeons, places where I could actually get it done, people who could do it for me. And I had I was like on Zoom or whatever version of like video conferencing existed in 2017, and on the phone with people in different surgery centers across the United States. I knew I wanted to keep it in the United States. There are places you can travel outside the US, but I wanted to stay here. I'd been in these consultations just to see like what the surgeons were like, what sort of things they offer, like what they could tell me about their recovery and the healing. They do this thing where they like show you pictures and you have to use like all of your brain power to just decide how to react to the pictures instead of actually taking in the visual information. It's very odd. But I'd just been in these consultations and I was trying to figure out who I was going to go with. At the point that I figured out that insurance would cover it, I was like, okay, I think I want to go to this place in California. It was Brownstein and Crane. And my surgeon was Dr. Heidi Wittenberg, who is now at Mosaic Care. At the time, she was doing, I think, her fellowship at Brownstein and Crane. And for that reason, because she was like a new surgeon who was like not going to be there forever, she had like so many openings. Like she was able to like squeeze me in really, really soon after that. Whereas for a lot of surgeons, it would have been like a 1 to 2 year wait at least just to get a surgery date. So January, I figured out that insurance would cover it. May was my surgery date. So those 4 months was just me planning, okay, where am I going to stay? What am I going to do while I'm like staying in town for like these post-op appointments? And, you know, the planning process eventually led me to, okay, I'm going to drive out there with my friend, my best friend. We're going to do random touristy stuff in San Francisco for like the week prior to my surgery, because I had to be there a week before for my pre-op appointment. On the day of the surgery, she's gonna leave because she had an internship in Washington, D.C., and someone else would come in and take care of me. So once we figured that out, it was just a matter of actually booking the Airbnb and driving the 17 hours that it took to get from Albuquerque to San Francisco. And that was it pretty much. Yeah.
Wow. Was there any major issues during that process or during the surgery, after the surgery?
I mean, I don't really think... No, I don't think there were. There was not really a huge issue with financials because I already had money put away for it. It's expensive. It's real expensive. And the insurance company would not fully cover the surgery because I was actually out of network with the surgeon. But they would cover most of it because I was still like staying in like a post-op care, and that was for sure covered. And even though it was out of network, they still covered some of the actual surgery itself. So that was just a little bit of a hiccup. I didn't really have that much trouble prior to the surgery. During the surgery, everything went well. Everything was fine. The day after the surgery, though, was when like all of the pain really started hitting me because the anesthesia from the surgery had fully worn off. And I also had like a lot of blood clots like in my bladder, which were just excruciatingly painful. I don't think that I've ever been in that much pain in my entire life. It was the only time in my life where I could really say that my pain was at a 10. That kind of just sets the standard for you. And just, you know, having any sort of genital reconstruction surgery, I feel like just has a real big potential to put you in a lot of pain because it's just such a sensitive area that's just being, well, reconstructed and rearranged. So the pain the day after the surgery was just immense. It was absolutely ridiculous. And I was crying and I didn't know how to make it stop. I was on some really heavy painkillers. I was like maxed out, I think. I was taking like 6 Oxy and 6 Percocet a day. It was quite a bit. But after the first day passed, I think they did something to like break up the blood clots in my bladder. I think they used like some sort of ultrasonic thing. I'm not really sure. My memories of that day are a little bit hazy because they were so clouded by the pain. But that second day was a lot better, and the third better still.
And would you say that the doctors and everyone from the doctor's office was affirming to you, or how was that experience?
Oh, definitely. I had a really good experience with my surgeon, and also the front desk staff were pretty good. I mean, I guess you kind of have to. If it's a surgery center that's like for trans people, you gotta have some degree of understanding about how to like treat trans people with respect and like how to address them properly and stuff. So yeah, I had a pretty good experience. I don't think that there was anyone who treated me in any sort of untoward or like even mildly transphobic way. I think when I was at the rehab center, a little bit of explanation. So the surgery is done at the surgery center, and then after like 24 hours, you get discharged to the rehab center where like nurses wait on you for like a couple days. At the rehab center, I think there were like one or two people, like orderlies or something, who were just like a little bit. They had the spirit, but they were like still a little bit. It was a little clunky, them referring to me as like a trans person. But all in all, it was like a really, really good and affirming experience. So yeah, top marks on that.
Can you talk a little bit about the financial burden that you undertook? So, as far as, did you have to take time off from a job? Did anyone help you financially? And how much approximately did it cost to stay in San Francisco during that time period?
I did have to take time off work. I was just working at an Italian restaurant at the time, and everyone there knew that I was trans and I was getting this surgery, and they supported me, and they were like, just take as much time off as you need, and that was fine. I was not getting paid for the time, but I was taking the time off. I was helped financially. In fact, like pretty much all of the financials were handled by my father, and the money mostly came from my college fund, which I mean, I was in college at the time, but because I'd gotten like a scholarship, I didn't have to like touch any of the money that was in the college fund. So that was mainly what we used for the payment of like the Airbnb and the surgery, whatever else it was that we needed to pay. I say we, but it was mainly just my dad who paid. It costs, oh gosh, I think it was like $100 something a night to stay in San Francisco. And I was there for, I want to say like probably some multiple of 7. I think it was either 28 days or 35. I think it was 28 days. I think I got there the day before the pre-op appointment. Then a week after the pre-op was surgery. Then there were 2 or 3 post-op appointments. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I guess I was there for like maybe 28 to 30 days. And so it cost like $3,000 or $4,000 total, which was so much. I didn't stay in San Francisco proper. I stayed in San Rafael, which is it's the North Bay. And I can't imagine how much more expensive it would have been if I was actually in the city, in San Francisco. But I needed to be on that side of the bay because that's where the surgery center was. And that was the reason why we went with that Airbnb specifically. And we wanted an Airbnb as opposed to a hotel because we wanted like a kitchen so that we wouldn't have to spend so much money on food. And I keep saying we to include myself as well as whoever was taking care of me, because you got to have someone taking care of you after that surgery. But yeah, I did have like all the help from my father, and I did have to take time off work. But when I came back, it was all straightened out. Did I fully answer that question? Was there any other parts?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, you did. I just wanted to know more about the financial aspect for folks that don't have that type of help.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I feel very privileged to like have that available to me. It literally would not have happened otherwise. I did not make enough money to like support that. So it's honestly like I feel really, really glad that was a thing that I was able to have.
Mm-hmm. And do you like how it looks?
It looks pretty good. Yeah, I like it a lot. I actually I haven't like, and I also just don't see a lot of like vulvas, but I don't think I've met anyone whose vulva looks exactly like mine. And at first I was like, oh, well, is that because mine is just weird? But now it's been like, 7 years, and it's just my vulva. I really like how it looks. And there is like a little bit of, laser hair removal that you have to do prior to the surgery so you don't have hair growing in parts where hair shouldn't grow because you flip things inside out. So there are like it's a little patchy when it comes to like the actual bush, but the actual vulva itself I really, really like, for sure.
Great. That's definitely a big plus, and something that matters is that, you like it for whatever it is,
Definitely.
Okay, so did you get sensation back, and how did that happen? How did you get there?
I did get sensation back. I think that there's like two different kinds of sensation that I should talk about here. The first of which is like the clitoral sensation, which I got immediately. Like as soon as the anesthesia wore off, I could feel it. I felt a lot of pain initially, and that faded over the course of a couple months. But there was just like just a twinge of pleasure in there, and that's what like really eased my mind as I was first recovering. Like within the first 24 hours, I could feel it, and that was really nice. I didn't have very much sensation like in the actual vagina for a couple months, and my surgeon described it as stubbing your toe in slow motion. Whenever you first stub your toe, it takes like a second or two for the full wave of pain to actually kick in, and that second or two of waiting, you're like, oh, this is really gonna hurt, and then it does. It's kind of like that, but for just like general sensation in the vagina. So, you know, when I was first dilating, I think like a week or two after my surgery, when the surgeon was showing me how to dilate, she was showing me like how far in I needed to go, and I was like, I was basically using purely visual cues to figure out how deep to go in, because I literally could not feel it as it was being inserted. I could feel, I think, a little bit of pressure, but there was no sensation telling me that it was actually contacting the vaginal walls, which it very much was. The entire thing was. But I think 8-9 months, I started getting like a little more sensation, and I think after about a year or two, I had like my actual first vaginal orgasm, so I could actually feel it enough to actually have an orgasm. And I think probably like after the 1 year mark, I could actually feel everything inside of my vagina as well as I can feel it now. I don't know if it's just like a matter of establishing some sort of proprioception, like correlating a certain sensation to this or correlating it to that, or if it was just like all a matter of the nerves reconnecting. But yeah, it took a little bit of time for the actual the nerves in the vagina to be able to tell me what was going on in there. So.
Wow. Okay. And so tell me a little bit about what sex is like then.
It's pretty fun. It's pretty good. Okay. I had sex once prior to vaginoplasty, and it was not a good experience. It was actually a little bit like, I felt so dysphoric that I was actually just a little bit traumatized from it. And so, I mean, that's setting the bar pretty low. But the first time I had sex after vaginoplasty, I messed around with someone like a couple months, like a month or two after I came back here to Albuquerque. And I was still like in a little bit of pain, but it was kind of worth it. Like the pleasure definitely outranked it. I wouldn't say that I actually had like sex until 2 years after vaginoplasty. And I didn't know what I was doing because I was using a completely new body part, and I didn't know how to have sex if I have a vagina. Like that was never, that's not part of like they don't explain that to you at the surgeon's office. You just have to figure that out. And for that reason, I was basically just like trying whatever I could with the person that I was having sex with at the time. And I got to like have a couple of experiences, but it wasn't until like literally like a couple of months ago that I had like actual like really good sex. I didn't really have a good frame of reference for like how good sex was supposed to be, I guess, until just a couple of months ago. And now I can definitely say that like I really, really enjoy sex, and that it is very fun. It's very pleasurable. And, you know, there are certain kinds of sex that I like more than others. I would definitely say that I haven't had penetrative sex that I've enjoyed very much up until this point. And that's mainly because no one that I've had penetrative sex with has fingers that are big enough for me to be satisfied by. And they also don't have penises. So if they were to like penetrate me with an object, they couldn't feel the object or like guide it, I guess. And that might just be why. But if someone is using like a dildo on me or even a dilator, honestly, like I feel like the dilators they gave you are kind of underrated as sex toys. They're very hard, which is something that I've noticed that I like. I don't really like the soft, like, kind of jelly things. Those just feel uncomfortable. But if someone is penetrating me like with a dildo and they're like controlling it with their hands, that is a very pleasurable experience for me. And just like any sort of like clitoral massage with like the hands, I think is a really, really great experience. I can appreciate oral, but my clitoris is also like very, very hooded. So I mean, it feels nice, but it doesn't really get me anywhere. Like I can appreciate it, but honestly, just getting penetrated with a well-controlled dildo and having my clitoris stimulated is what I really, really enjoy. And that just, it's so nice to be able to experience. No one tells you this. No one tells you that like getting penetrated like vaginally is a completely novel experience. There's literally nothing you can compare it to. It doesn't feel like any other orifice, really. It just feels like neutral good. And sometimes it can feel neutral great. But it literally just, it's so strange and cool. I wish I could describe to someone who does not currently and has not ever had a vagina how it feels, because it's just really, really amazing and fantastic. It's pretty cool.
So you mentioned before that you messed around with someone, and then you mentioned that you had sex, and then you described some ways in which you enjoy sexual intimacy. What is the difference between messing around and having sex? Just for clarification purposes.
To me, I say messing around is basically just like what would be included in foreplay, making out, anything regarding like the stimulation of the breasts, grinding without taking your bottoms off, which is basically what happened when I messed around just a couple months after surgery. And I didn't want actually to have sex at that point because I knew that it would be just a little bit too painful. I tried masturbating, and that was also a huge adventure, just like figuring out every possible way that I could masturbate. And in my experiences masturbating, I did not really think that I was ready to have sex because I still just had some residual pain. And the pain did not fade enough for me to have like a full conscious orgasm until like 6 months after getting surgery. And I say conscious because, and I didn't realize this at the time, I'd been having wet dreams like for a month or two leading up to actually having my first conscious orgasm. And when I would wake up, I'd be like, was that? No, there's no way. And I guess it was also that I was just used to like wet dreams, like feeling a certain way after you woke up and actually being able to see like physical evidence of it. But until the point where I actually had my first conscious orgasm, I was like, maybe it just feels good. Maybe that's not an orgasm. And then when I had the orgasm, I was like, oh, this has already happened. And I was just asleep while it happened. But yeah, that's my very long-winded response to what's the difference between messing around and having sex.
Okay, so you mentioned briefly the word wet, which reminds me to ask you, do you get wet?
I don't really get wet. I do get wet following an orgasm, but the amount of like natural lubrication that I experience is like not really enough to facilitate insertion of anything. I rely heavily on lube. And originally I felt like a little bit insecure about that because I was like, oh, well, you know, everyone else has like a fun time. And then I like talked to like another human person and they were like, oh yeah, sometimes people need lube. And I also had like an acquaintance who I just had chronic dryness, for lack of a better term. And this acquaintance was a cis woman. And knowing that a cis woman struggled with the same thing that I did really made me feel a whole lot better about it. But yeah, really, until the point of orgasm, I basically just need lube. And after orgasm, I'm like, fine. But I guess like the plumbing hookup is such that any fluid that would have been expelled during orgasm prior to surgery is expelled during orgasm post-surgery, just in a different spot. And that's what would facilitate natural lubrication in my case. But prior to orgasm, there's not really a lot to work with. So I always say stocked up on lube.
Okay, great. So we've talked a little bit about sex and your vagina. Why did you get a vagina versus zero depth? And can you describe what that is?
Yeah, so there's a difference between like a full vaginoplasty and like a zero depth. I think they might just call it a vulvoplasty. And the zero depth thing basically just gives you the external vulva without anything to like any interior part rather, that you could insert things into. And there are surgeons who do both, and there are surgeons who really want to do more of those zero depth things. And I think the reason why is because a lot of surgeons want to avoid liability. And if you're creating like a cavity inside of a human being, then you have to like maintain that cavity. You have to make it so that it doesn't prolapse. You have to make it so it doesn't collapse and stick to itself. And that's a little more complicated. I wanted a full depth vaginoplasty because I basically just wanted, for lack of a better term, the full experience. I wanted to understand what vagina havers are able to do with their bodies and the ways that they're able to have sex. And I also just really, at the end of the day, just really wanted it. I really just wanted to be able to like stick stuff inside of my vagina and just see how that is. And just have like more options for whenever I'm having sex or masturbating. So yeah.
Cool. All right, so to kind of finish this off, what are your overall feelings about the decision, the process, the outcome? Now you're 7 years, I think 7 years, right? 7 years after, how do you feel about just all of that 7 years post-op?
It was like the best decision I ever made, pretty much. Like I don't have to worry about tucking, and I can't tell you like how much of a weight that is off my back. I was tucking for 3 years. 2014 to 2017, I was tucking. And tucking for me was really painful. And it limited the amount of fashion options that I had. And that sucked. I didn't want that to be like my everyday. Now I can just like literally wear whatever pants and skirts that I want, and I don't have to worry about like a line from my gaff. I don't have to worry about my tuck slipping out. I can just exist in public for however long I want and not just be in pain the longer it goes on. I also am able to like enjoy sex for like the first time in my life, which is really, really good. It's really nice. I can look at myself naked and feel like wonderful about how my body looks. And I just feel very integrated with my body, more so than I ever have been in my entire life. So it was like, yeah, a really, really good decision. I feel really great about it 7 years down the line. And the really interesting thing about it is that I thought, at least for like the first year or so, that this would always feel like a new and novel experience. But now it just feels normal in like the best way. It feels it's just part of my body, you know? So I feel really fantastic about it. I feel really fantastic about the sexual pleasure I'm able to derive. Like honestly, the best orgasms in my life have been post-op, and that's really, really fun. I'm able to orgasm in new ways, which is really cool too. And I just feel so much more like I can focus on anything else now that I've resolved the intense dysphoria that I felt about my genitals. And I think even if that was the only thing that I got out of it, that would have been worth it. All of the pain, all the time spent just like healing and just laying there trying to like watch any TV show to get my mind off the fact that I'm just stuck in a bed for a little bit. All of that is worth it if it gets me to where I am today. So all in all, real good decision for me. I really liked it.
And do you have anything else to add? Did we cover everything?
I think that's it. I really do think that, yeah, I think we got everything.
Okay, great. Thanks for all of your honesty and openness.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm always glad to talk about my vagina. What can I say?